Hey guys, welcome. Fedora Friday number 25. Fedora Friday number 25, right? We hit the big quarter century mark, right? That's a pretty big deal. So hopefully you guys are all having a great week, getting hopefully a nice start to your weekend. Man, yeah, this one should be good, but it should be pretty short. So I just want to make sure you guys are all doing well. Not sure if we'll have anybody join us, but hopefully, like I said, you guys are gearing up for your weekend. So yeah, pretty good stuff, man. Still kind of reeling from the trip to Puerto Rico. Kind of trying to get back my bearings, right? But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, today I wanted to kind of focus on another like Frank Sinatra vehicle, right? So I think a little bit back, I did Robin and the Seven Hoods, right? 1964. Not necessarily a quality movie, but was fun, right? Definitely had a lot of hats in it. This time is another Frank Sinatra movie, but this time he's not really the star of the show, right? We got good old Marlon Brando, who we covered in The Godfather, right? So this time from 1955, so taking a step backwards from that era. And you can even see like Frank Sinatra looks visibly thinner, right? So it's a different Frank Sinatra than we saw in the 60s. But this was a fun one for a lot of reasons. So yeah, so hopefully you guys are all doing well. Let's get the slideshow in here. Like I said, this will be a short one. But hopefully, if you guys haven't seen this, I know there's a lot of folks that aren't big fans of musicals. I don't know. I don't even know if I can qualify myself as a fan of musicals. I definitely think I am. But regardless, even if you're just a standard hat nerd, this is always a fun movie. So yeah, so this takes place in the 1950s, right? So the movie was made in 1955, and it does take place in the 50s. The written story. This is a Damon Runyon story. Actually, I think it was adapted from the 1930s, right? So you kind of have a mix of feels in here, right? So the writing of the story was made for the 30s, but the way it was created was more contemporary for the time, right? And you have a New York, right? So we got Jedi. Hey, Jedi, how's it going? Haven't seen it in many years, but remember it as being good. Yeah. I agree. It's one of those things that it's fun. I think that's the main thing. It's fun, not just as a hat nerd, but just with the music. And I think that's kind of how Frank Sinatra, a lot of his movies end up being like they're fun. You don't really take them that seriously. But yeah, it is what it is. But it does take place in New York City, right? So you get right from the get-go, you get New York City, and you get a bunch of hats. You got some scenes here from New York, and you're introduced right away to kind of some core characters here. You got Frank Sinatra, and then to one side he's got Benny South Street, and then you got Nicely Johnson. So you get a feel for the hats already. And for me, I couldn't stop staring at Frank Sinatra's Hamburg, right? He has kind of like, it kind of looks black in this photo, but I believe in the movie, when you look at it, it's kind of a dark blue felt, and it's just a very, very, very nice hat. And like paired with his suit, he's kind of like, again, I believe the two characters in here, mainly, so you got Frank Sinatra and Marlon Brando. So Frank Sinatra plays Nathan Detroit, right? So he essentially runs the crap games in New York City, and he's kind of like, he's out of money, right? So he has to like have some money to be able to make money, right? To be able to put on these crack games. So pretty much the opening scenario is like, hey, I need money, right? There's folks coming into town that are looking for action, right? They're looking for crap game, and I need some money to right? So they're kind of coming up with ways they can kind of scare up some money. And so that's how you kind of see them, operating in the beginning. So you see here another angle of that kind of same scene. Interesting, like I said, a lot of hats right for the get-go. Now again, this is Probably more consistent with the 1950s, right? The attire, right? I mean, again, I couldn't tell you because I'm not an expert, but it doesn't scream 1930s to me. But yeah, that could be a good thing. I mean, at least for me. Um, you can see here another kind of a scene in here. You get to see more hats, this time also a female, kind of a high society female with her husband kind of lugging around a bunch of gifts. So anyway, they're trying to kind of scare up some money, and it dawns on Nathan Detroit that Sky Masterson, is nearby, and Sky Masterson is played by Marlon Brando. Now, Sky Masterson's a notorious gambler, right? And Nathan knows this because he kind of runs all the games. He knows all the big gamblers. So they kind of plot. Nathan plots up a scheme to kind of cheat Sky Masterson out of some money, right? He kind of agrees to kind of come up with, I guess, whether that bakery sells more strudels or cake, something along those lines. Now he already knows. Nathan knows the number of like what sells more, their cakes or their strudel. And Sky, being the master gambler that he is, knows that Nathan must be up to something, right? So he essentially kind of just just pushes that aside, and kind of you can see how slick of a character Sky Masterson is, right? As a master gambler, right? He knows when the books are cooked against him, and essentially they kind of get on to another side bet, right? And the bet really is that Nathan's going to be able to pick any woman in the city, right? So even though Sky's known as a smooth operator, he's going to pick any woman in the city, and Sky has to be able to take that woman out to dinner in Havana, Cuba. Like pretty kind of outlandish kind of a scenario. Who knows? Right? So Havana, Cuba definitely was known as the spot, right, for the high rollers back in the day. And but yeah, that was the bet. And later on, we get introduced into the woman that he picks. But yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. But you can see some more shots here, right? Now, in this movie, you kind of constantly see Nathan Detroit in this Hamburg, right? He's always wearing a hat. You kind of always see Sky Masterson with a fedora, but not always with a fedora on. And I'm sure that has to do with probably personal preference on Marlon Brando's part. But when he does have it on, right, you can see in this shot here, man, just a striking, right? He's got the hat tilt, just an amazing, amazing look. I'll give you another screenshot here of kind of like the four main characters, right? The two main, right? We talked about Frank Sinatra as Nathan Detroit. We had Marlon Brando as Sky Masterson. Now, Marlon Brando's love interest here, right? So the lady that Nathan chooses to be able to be the target of this bet for Sky Masterson is Sarah Brown, right? Played by Gene Simmons here on the right in red. And now Sarah is kind of a holy roller, right? She is the leader at the local mission, the Save a Soul mission, right? And she's right away, you could tell that she's a no-nonsense type of lady. Nathan sees that. He realizes that this is going to be a real challenge for Sky because he knows this lady, right? He knows her reputation. So it's an interesting dynamic, and we'll get a little bit more into that. And Nathan actually also has a love interest, and it's actually his fiance, but he hasn't married her, right? Like it's been years that he's been engaged, but he doesn't marry her. Jedi says such a massive tilt on Brando's hat. Agreed. It looks really good. Like I said, he doesn't wear a hat often, I guess, but in the scenes that he's in with the hat, man, that hat tilt, the whole suit, and he's dressed impeccably throughout, right? Sky Masterson is, that kind of James Bondish kind of guy, the man about town, right? The master gambler, right? Nobody gets over on him. So yeah, I agree. But yeah, Nathan Detroit's love interest is Miss Adelaide here, played by Vivian Blaine. And she just has like this New York accent and has that nasally voice. And all she wants is for Nathan to get a regular job, right? To leave the gambling, right? Running the crap games, be legitimate, and then to marry her, right? And she doesn't really get a whole super lot of screen time, but she's an interesting character nonetheless as well. But for me, Sarah Brown for sure is takes the cake. And you can see here, another shot here of all four walking together, right? You got again another striking fedora on Sky Masterson here with the super wide ribbon, right? It's got the hat tilt and the super wide ribbon, looks very sharp. And of course, you got the Hamburg on Nathan Detroit, just impeccable, right? I don't know how I feel about the bow tie. Never been really a big bow tie, but Frank Sinatra pulls it off, right? I mean, it's Frank Sinatra after all, right? So yeah, some more shots here of the Hamburg on Nathan Detroit, right? Like, wow, just an amazing hat. Like I said, at certain angles, depending on the lighting, it looks more black, but I believe it's actually a blue felt. Man, it just looks really sharp, and in this movie, you got a more svelte looking Frank Sinatra, but the big old Hamburg doesn't look out of place on him. I think it's really flattering look. So yeah, so shout out to Frank. I know Frank Sinatra was mostly known for the trilby, right? Like we talked about the Frank Sinatra style in the back of the head, right? But in this movie here, he's got the Hamburg and it looks really good. So I'll show you some more shots of Nathan Detroit. Again, just a really striking figure. Again, we've talked about this before. Frank Sinatra definitely is and always will be a style icon, right? He has some very timeless looks, and it's just like signature, right? Like it's known as like the Frank Sinatra look. So you can see more angles here. You can see more fedoras on some of these shady characters. Remember, he's just a guy that is trying to, right? He really doesn't have any intentions to change. But that's really what it's all about, right? Let's see, Jedi here says, I think I just figured something out about myself. I like the shorter brim to begin with, but it definitely takes a wider brim to get the big tilt on a hat like that and get that old style. Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah. For me, I think you're right. I think the bigger brims lend themselves more to the hat tilt. As well as you want a little bit of extra size, right? Like one thing that you also want to make sure is that maybe if you're a certain size, go up another centimeter or so, at least to give you a little bit more room to get that tilt on, right? I just find it's a little easier that way. It could be in, maybe 2 centimeters. But I find that if you give yourself a little bit of extra room on the head, you'll find that the hat tilt feels a lot more comfortable, a lot more natural. So yeah, good observation. Hey, it's never too late to observe these things, right? And that it gives us another reason to buy another hat. But yeah, you can see here that pinstripe suit and that Hamburg, and he kind of has a hat tilt on that Hamburg as well. But yeah, just a lot of hats in this movie. But I just didn't find a lot of the shots that I really wanted to. And that kind of makes sense, right? I mean, movies from the 1950s, you're probably not going to get a lot of the shots like you would with a lot more of the contemporary movies where they have dedicated photo shoots for. But yeah, definitely some sharp outfits in this movie. And you can see here another angle of that same scene, right? You got Nathan Detroit, and then you got the gentleman next to him, right? Again, this is probably more consistent with kind of 1950s hat fashion, right? Not necessarily like the 30s or before, right? With the super high crowns. I think you get some of that, but not a whole heck of a lot. So, but yeah, just to give you guys an idea, in case you haven't really watched this movie or you haven't seen it in a long time, like Jedi, and you kind of want to rewatch it, right? From a hat nerd's perspective. So here you can see kind of a shot of Sky Masterson at kind of the cabaret, right? He's got that gorgeous gray suit with matching gray fedora with the super wide ribbon. You got a nice matching tie with a black shirt and the black shoes. Just again, Marlon Brando strikes a cutting figure, right? I mean, he pretty much was kind of that it guy during this time. So yeah, it makes sense. And some more photos. Again, I think these are kind of more photo shoot photos here. And you got, again, another very familiar pose for Sky Masterson, a look, which is he has the hat in his hand, not necessarily on his head. But yeah, just excellent, excellent style. Here's another view of that suit. Again, the shirt kind of looks more grayish here in this, like a dark gray in this photo, but man, very striking. So yeah, basically, the whole premise of the movie is Sky Masterson, a guy that gambles, right? A master gambler, doesn't take unnecessary gambles, always knows what he's going to go into before he gets into it. And the bet really is that he's going to take Sarah Brown, right? The prudish Sarah Brown, out to dinner in Havana for $1,000, right? And you can see here kind of a shot of Sky Masterson with Sarah Brown. And the main point is that he does, right? He does get Sarah Brown into out to dinner, right? He has to go, he has to confront her. She's very standoffish. She doesn't really care for gamblers, right? She kind of knows probably Sky's reputation, right? And essentially he has to kind of agree, right, that he is, right, he tries to seek out her help. He comes up with some silly backstory to seek out her help, and then agrees ultimately that if she goes out to dinner with him, he will deliver 12 souls, right, a dozen souls to the mission. And for her, it was a gamble, right? You see here the kind of the theme here is like, it's like she's also took that gamble, right? He made her a proposition and she took him up on it. And then he does convince her to go out to Havana, right? And in the course of staying out in Havana, I don't know if he does this purposefully. I believe he does it purposefully, but he does get her drunk, right? Like, she's somebody that doesn't drink alcohol, but he ordered her dulce de leches. And, she thinks it's a milkshake. But it's spiked with alcohol. She gets super drunk. Of course, some kind of barroom brawl breaks out, and Sky Masterson, and as well as as Sarah, kind of go into this bar fight, and in the process, they kind of fall for each other. At some point, they're talking, and Sky kind of confesses. He says, "Hey, man." He doesn't say man, but he's like, it says, "Hey, I've only got you here. I've got to come clean. I only brought you here because, well, I made a bet." And she doesn't skip a beat. I think she's fallen for him and sees that he's not the degenerate that she kind of initially thought he was, right? That he kind of has a much nicer, deeper side, and decides then that she kind of has fallen for him as well, and doesn't skip a beat, and essentially says, "Well, you're a gambler. That's what you do." So it is kind of a neat little, I guess, love story. And really, the moral of the story here is that love essentially is a gamble, right? I mean, and it's a gamble. It's like a two-way gamble, right? Even though they portray the guys here as forever being the gambler. But the way Damon Runyon sets up this story, it kind of just connotes the whole underlying theme here is that you go into these relationships gambling, right? And you do it because you want the big payoff, and they go into it sometimes for the wrong reasons or for different reasons, and they come out in love, and it's all worth it at the end. So it's kind of like, even though some of the characters here, or the majority of the characters, are probably not the most upstanding, right? Like, this is not a movie that has a lot of characters that you're like, oh man, they're super nice. Maybe with the exception of Sarah. Everybody here kind of always has like seemingly an agenda, but even Sarah does have an agenda, right? She's a missionary. But it does kind of have a sweet undertone, and you can see more shots here of Sky and Sarah. Again, that massive hat tilt, on Sky Masterson, right? Just an amazing, amazing look, man. Wow, just super style. And you can see here another shot of all four, and this time you also get to see a shot of of Miss Adelaide, who's played by Vivian Blaine. And again, she's kind of like that, has that heavy New York accent and that nasally voice. But again, all she wants is to marry Nathan and for him to go straight, right? To give up his gambling ways. So you can see more shots of the four. Again, that Hamburg on Sinatra is fantastic. I love it. And then you get, you do get to see Sarah Brown also in hats as well. So for the folks looking for female styles as well, you do have that in this movie. Here's a nice look here, kind of the crown on Nathan Detroit's Hamburg. Again, out of all the hats, this probably is my favorite hat in the movie. Maybe the second place would be like the gray fedora on Sky Masterson. But you know me, I love a good Hamburg. And here's kind of a shot of one of the gangsters, right? Where I remember, Nathan Detroit is trying to gain some money, right? He made that bet with Sky Masterson to be able to host a big crap game with folks coming into town. And one of those folks is, Big Julie out of Chicago, right? It's always like some kind of movie where they're in New York, there's some gangster from Chicago or vice versa. And this is played by, Big Julie's played by an actor called B.S. Pulley. Right? He's kind of like, he's kind of like a big thug, right? Like it's like one of these again prototypical Chicago style gangsters. Again, you don't see the high crown action, right, from the gangsters of the 20s and 30s from Chicago especially, but you do see some very sharp dress, and some very funny one-liners. I think that's kind of the one thing as well. It comes across sometimes as a little corny, but there's definitely a lot of like one-liners. Sometimes you have to kind of rewind it back. Did he just say what he just said? Here's another shot of Big Julie again. Kind of probably after a long night of gambling and and bossing people around. What else? Let's see here. This is Joe McTurk, who plays Angie the Ox, just to give you some more styles. This is a little bit higher crown. And you still got that super wide ribbons, nice brown felt. Again, I do love the hats, man. Wow. Some really good ones in here as well. There's a bunch of ones that I just couldn't find photos of that I wanted to include, but hey, it is what it is. And here's another one. This is obviously, if there's going to be gambling and crime happening, there's going to be a cop. And this time the cop is Lieutenant Brannigan, played by Robert Keith. Also dressed pretty sharp, right? It's got a nice gray fedora with the super wide black ribbon. Again, just kind of a no-nonsense character. And obviously, you're always going to have that in the movies. And I guess to kind of close out, I wanted to kind of call out one of these scenes that happens much later in the movie. And it's like, I don't know, there's a lot of reasons why I like this, besides the fact that it's chock full of hats, right? It's like the big gambling scene right at the end, right? When Nathan finally sets up the crap game with Big Julie and all the rest of the gang, all the degenerate gamblers. And essentially Big Julie loses all his money, but then he ends up bullying Nathan Detroit into losing all his money to him. And then at some point, Sky Masterson shows up again. He had already gone to Havana. He's changed. He's in love, right? He's kind of had a change of heart, right? Which is another underlying theme, that love can be transformative, right? And he's out there to make good on his promise, right? To deliver the souls to the mission, right? To Sarah Brown and the Save a Soul mission. And so he goes out there at the very end and essentially makes a bet with every single gambler in the scene, which is outlandish, for $1,000, right? If he wins at the dice roll, they have to go to the mission. But if he loses, they have to go and he has to go and pay each and every one of them $1,000. So it just shows you, like I said, the type of gambler, like even in love, he's still true to who he is, but this time he's gambling for a good cause, right? So it's all different now. And the main thing about this scene is that he goes into Luck Be a Lady Tonight. And if you know anything about that song, you know that that's a huge Frank Sinatra hit. And it was interesting because a little bit about the story behind that is that Frank Sinatra was not too happy that that number went to Marlon Brando, right? Like he really wanted that. They used Frank Sinatra to kind of coach Marlon Brando about that song, but Frank Sinatra really just he coached it as if he would do it, right? So he was kind of a little bit of that little jealousy there between Frank Sinatra and Marlon Brando. And it's funny because in the making of the Godfather series, they actually call that out. Marlon Brando in that show confesses that the reason why he agreed to do the Godfather was that he knew Frank Sinatra didn't like that movie being made, right? Because he knew that the Lounge Singer was based on his real life, and so he said that was really the main thing, the main reason why he agreed to do that. And I just got a real big chuckle out of it because I did hear that there was some tension there between Frank Sinatra and Marlon Brando, and to hear it kind of validated in the show was really cool. But yeah. Obviously, in my mind, there's no way Marlon Brando could hold a candle to Frank Sinatra in any song. But I just thought it was really comical, that, the fact that Marlon Brando even agreed, right? It's like when you got Frank Sinatra as your co-star, and then you're like, you know what, Frankie, baby, I got this, right? Like I'll take care of it. I'll show you how it's done, babe. That was just the most hilarious thing about that whole scene to me. Some more shots of that scene. You get more of those fedoras, right? You got a pork pie sprinkled in there as well. Just some really great hats, I think. And again, look at that profile. Look at that suit. That kind of it looks like a pink tie on Sky Masterson. It just works, man. It just, what a striking figure. So, yeah, and I think this is right after he punches out Big Julie. So Big Julie's kind of like looking at him when he's kind of making the bet, for their souls. So yeah, I think that's it in terms of the photos. I mean, like I said, I called it. I was gonna have a really short show here, but yeah, I really did like this musical for like that main reason, right? I mean, the main reason besides the hats is the fact that the underlying message, even though, like I said, a lot of the characters don't seem to be like fantastic people, right? It does have that underlying message that love is a gamble, right? Like you go into it with trying to cover up a lot of your insecurities or your flaws, and ultimately, the beautiful thing is when you actually reveal your true self, right? That somebody accepts you because they know that you're actually, besides all your flaws, you're actually a really good person, and you're worth the gamble, right? So yeah, so that was it. I mean, I think I'll leave it right here. Hopefully, you guys have a fantastic weekend. And I will catch you at Hat Tuesday number 26, right? So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you and leave you the way I always do, right? Which is support all the fine folks in the Good Luke's Network. Support the channel if you can, right? We're still trying to raise up our subscriber count. I think we're at 123 right now. But even if you don't, right? Even if you choose not to support the channel or any of the fine folks associated with the Good Luke's Network, or even outside the Good Luke's Network, the one thing you got to do, right? It's non-negotiable, or else we'll get Big Julie after you, right? And he won't hurt you or anything. All Big Julie will do will be like, boop, maybe hit the subscribe button for you, right? But regardless of that, the one thing you got to do is you got to stay hatting, my friend. Have a great day. Ciao, everybody. Ciao.